The wizarding world is full of wonder, staircases that move, potions that heal, spells that fix broken bones in seconds. But in a world where anything seems possible, what does the inclusion of bodies that don't fit the mould mean? Because when we look closely, the Harry Potter universe, like so much of our own world, has a serious problem with disability and difference. Characters who read as disabled are either stigmatised, sidelines, or magically fixed, and when a cure is possible, it's treated as the only option, and the moral one, as if living with a disability has no value of its own. And that's what makes Harry Potter worth talking about, beyond, the turf stuff. Why are you going after Emma Watson, JK? She was just trying to say that it's complex to have warm feelings for people based on their past kindness towards you when they now have views that you do not agree with and feel opposed to who they once were. Painfully relatable. And then there's, the racism and the homophobia and the anti-Semitism. Ugh, really? Look, Harry Potter was just as much a part of my childhood as any other millennial or younger. I remember how much I lapped up the series, how enchanted I was with the idea of a magical school, or how I pushed to read the entire 4th book in a single night because everyone at school rushed to see who could read it first, and I forgot I was the only person with hyperlexia, so it would be boring as hell for the next 2 weeks while I couldn't talk to anyone about the ending. But even though many of us grew up with Harry Potter, the books, the films, the fandom, the fact that it has endured and in fact continued into other more recent spin-offs and even is being readapted means it is important to interrogate. It can't just be seen as of its time in a way that Friends is a show set in a New York City of only white people? It is also weirdly homophobic. Hi, I'm Jessica Kellgren-Fozard. This is my YouTube channel, and I promise I'm not always out to ruin your favourite media properties. If that is your jam though, subscribe for more. I make amusing and educational videos about disability and LGBTQ+ history and current affairs. Sometimes the current affairs part of that's just that I'm a vintage-loving disabled lesbian parent with newborn twins who's trying her best. Solidarity to everyone in the bottle washing trenches right now. You can also follow me on Instagram for adorable baby clothes. But anyway, yes, many of us grew up with Harry Potter, and as adults it's important to ask, what stories were we told about bodies, about worth, and about who gets to belong in a magical world? And what do those stories mean for us in the here and now? Another important question is, are you as safe online as you can possibly be? Because unlike the wizarding world, the internet is not protected by magic spells. It's full of prying eyes, data-hungry dementors, and the occasional troll, literal or metaphorical. That's why I use Surfshark VPN, sponsor of today's video. It keeps your personal information safe and your browsing private by encrypting everything you do online, whether you're working from home, watching YouTube, or falling back into your JK Rowling transphobia in the Supreme Court rabbit hole at 2 a.m. Surfshark lets you connect unlimited devices on one account, so I can protect my laptop, phone, Claudia's laptop, the work laptop. We might have one too many laptops. Plus, you can virtually travel anywhere, meaning you can watch shows and movies from other countries, which is just like having your own portkey for streaming. Right now, Surfshark's offering an incredible deal. Go to surfshark.com/Jessica or use code Jessica at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN for free. So, now that you're safe from digital dark arts, let's answer the question, is magic for everyone? For so many of us, Harry Potter wasn't just a series of books. It was midnight releases at the local bookshop, fanfiction forums, movie marathons with friends and family, a community just like you. It was something to build your personality around. But as we've gotten older, we've begun asking harder questions about the very real and non-magical world that we actually live in. And thus, also the fictional worlds that we love. Because stories aren't just entertainment, they shape how we see ourselves and each other. They teach us who is a hero, who belongs, and who gets pushed to the margin. Why is Hermione made fun of by the supposed good guys for attempting to help an enslaved group of people? Don't tell me it's fine because they're 13. Why are even the good characters prejudiced? Why are all of the most powerful magic users in the book men? Why is Ron an incel? Why is there such a weird amount of fat shaming? And why are there no openly gay people in the... Okay, I mean, we'll get to that later. Sure. Maybe that's a good thing after all. Yeah, it turns out that sometimes no representation is better than bad representation, so... Now, some of these might seem like nitpicks to you, but when we're talking about ableism in Harry Potter, we're not nitpicking. We're uncovering the ways disability is portrayed as weakness, tragedy, or something to be cured. And just like the series struggles with race, gender, and queerness, ableism reflects our real-world power struggles that many of us are still fighting today. Critiquing Harry Potter doesn't mean we can't love it. It means that we're holding it accountable, the same way we hold our culture, our politics, and ourselves accountable. It's just asking, what lessons did these stories teach us about difference? And how can we imagine something better? ableism in the wizarding world. One of the most iconic disabled characters in the series is Alistair Mad-Eye Moody. He's introduced in Goblet of Fire and is described as a battle-scarred veteran, covered in injuries from a lifetime of fighting dark wizards. He looked as though he had suffered some kind of accident. One of his legs was wooden, and he had a large chunk missing from his nose. The most disturbing thing about his appearance, however, was his magical eye, which spun around in its socket. From the very first description, Moody's body is defined by damage that marks him as othered: a wooden leg, a mutilated face, and most famously, his magical eye. From his description, the book wants us to know that he is different, dangerous, unpredictable, even grotesque. He is known not by his name, Alistair, but by the name derived from his grizzled features: Mad-Eye. His disability literally becomes his identity. In the film, this is exaggerated even further. The prosthetic eye bulges unnaturally, swivels with a mechanical sound effect, and makes him seem more uncanny than human. His body becomes shorthand for his persona, his aggression, his madness. His disabilities are linked to character traits. A scarred body means a scarred mind. He is suspicious, unstable, even frightening to children. Disability here is used as spectacle, a visual marker of trauma, toughness, and otherness. Yet, the narrative doesn't explore Moody's experience as a disabled wizard. His prosthetics and magical eye are treated less as accessibility tools and more as gimmicks. His leg, for instance, could be a site of magical adaptation, a chance to imagine how disabled people might craft their own power within this world. Is he walking up and down all of those twisty staircases at Hogwarts? Instead, it becomes a caricature, the stereotypical peg leg of a pirate, the exaggerated limp of a veteran who's given everything to war. This plays into a broader media trope: the disabled soldier, whose body is a monument to violence and sacrifice, but who can never truly return to ordinary life. Moody is respected, but only as a half-broken weapon. His disabled body doesn't humanize, it dehumanizes him. His disability is never portrayed as neutral or simply part of who he is. It's always framed through fear, pity, or awe. Students stare, adults call him eccentric, even his friends treat him as damaged goods. He's not been the same since, well, you know, the war took a lot out of him. If you're a magical person living in a magical world, why hasn't anyone put time into developing a prosthetic for these lauded veterans that, doesn't leave the wobbler hobbling around in clear pain? Is disability still so far down the invention to-do list in a world where you aren't wasting time washing the dishes because a flick of your hand they will, do it themselves? Do you not have the time? What are you doing with your extra time? J.K. Rowling gives us a magical world where wands can regrow bones, but chooses to portray Moody's disabilities as permanent scars. That permanence should be an opportunity for representation, a character living and thriving with disability in a world of cure-all magic. Instead, the narrative links disability to paranoia, trauma, and instability. Disability becomes a symbol of what's been lost, rather than just a valid way of existing. So when we ask, is this representation or exploitation? The answer leans towards the latter. Mad-Eye Moody doesn't expand our understanding of disabled life. He reinforces the stereotype that a disabled body is a broken one defined entirely by damage, war, and fear. The fantastical tech of his magical eye could have been used for visionary disability pride, but instead it reinforces that disabled bodies are othered. What does it say about disability in the world when things can be cured instantly? Well, more on that later. If Mad-Eye Moody embodies the stereotype of the scarred veteran, then Remus Lupin represents another ableist trope, the diseased outcast. Introduced in Prisoner of Azkaban, Lupin is gentle, brilliant, and deeply beloved, but also marked by a condition that makes him unemployable, untrustworthy, and dangerous. His face was pale and lined, and he looked tired and ill. However, his eyes were light brown, and they had a kind, amused look in them. From the moment we meet him, Lupin is described through the language of tragic illness. Pale, lined, tired, sickly, his kindness and talent exist alongside a secret. Oh yes, this gentle, soft soul, so extremely close to his male best friend, and holding a secret that meant other children would have shunned him when he was younger, and parents wouldn't want him supervising their children as a teacher now. But no, despite the queer coding, he's apparently not gay. He's just a werewolf. Yeah, me too. As Rowling herself said in 2008, Remus Lupin was someone who had been infected young. who suffered stigma, and who had a fear of infecting others, who was terrified he would pass on his condition to his son. And it was a way of examining prejudice, unwarranted prejudice towards a group of people, and also examining why people might become embittered when they're treated that unfairly. I get that it's like your story, Joanne, but you wrote him gay. HIV can affect anyone, not just gay men, but HIV stigma and homophobia are inextricably linked. Lupin explains, it was the kind of thing that the ministry looks for excuses to blame werewolves for. They think we spread contamination. The metaphor couldn't be clearer. Werewolves are stigmatized, feared as contagious, denied work and housing, and forced to live on the margins of society. Lupin, despite his intelligence and compassion, is treated as a second-class citizen because of something he cannot change. This plays out painfully in the story. When Snape exposes his condition, Lupin immediately resigns from Hogwarts. He doesn't fight, he doesn't demand justice, he simply accepts the exclusion, because he knows society will never accept him. His narrative arc reinforces the message. Disability equals isolation. Oh, and queerness, obviously. Queerness needs to isolation too. It's all over not great. I have been shunned all my adult life, unable to find paid employment, because of what I am. Rowling builds a sympathetic character, but she also ties his worth to how well he hides his condition. He is only valued when he is passing as normal. The moment his identity becomes visible, he is dangerous, unemployable, unfit. Visually, the films make this metaphor even harsher. His transformation is terrifying. A body out of control, animalistic, monstrous. Rather than exploring disability or illness as an identity, the narrative equates it with fear, contagion, and loss of humanity. Lupin could have been an empowering figure. A disabled or unwell character who also happens to be vocally queer, like, said out loud in the text. Just saying. Navigating stigma, building community, thriving in spite of systematic discrimination. No. Instead, the text just doubles down on the cure or tragedy narrative. Wolfsbane potion doesn't give him freedom, it only suppresses his condition. Marriage and fatherhood don't give him stability, he feels unworthy of love. And his story ends not with liberation, but with death in battle, a narrative solution to his marginalization. Bury your gaze, am I right? As JK herself stated in an ebook from September 2016, the wizarding community is as prone to hysteria and prejudice as the Muggle one, and the character of Lupin gave me a chance to examine those attitudes. Some weren't best pleased with this, however, including Becky Allen in the Body.com series on HIV stigma and discrimination, who noted that within the ebook, Rowling reminds readers that Lupin, despite the stigma he previously faced, eventually found acceptance with a wife, a son, wonderful friends. Not a mention of helping to rid the world of the most evil wizard of them all. In the end, Lupin dies, and his son grows up orphaned. His narrative isn't one of survival or acceptance, but one of sacrifice and erasure. Disability, in Rowling's world, is too often incompatible with life itself. On to Neville Longbottom, and don't worry, we will absolutely mention the glow-up. Neville Longbottom is often remembered as the underdog who finally comes into his own. But if we look closely at how he's written, especially in the early books, his arc is deeply tied to ableist stereotypes about clumsiness, incompetence, and transformation as the only path to worth. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life because his grandmother had never let him near one. This was something Harry quickly realised, as Neville kept zooming around, wobbling and swerving so badly that he almost fell off. From his very first appearances, Neville is comic relief. He's mocked for clumsiness, forgetfulness, and weakness. His broomstick disaster in the first flying lesson turns him into a spectacle of ridicule. The language Rowling uses, wobbling, swerving, fell off, paints him as a body out of control, incompetent compared to the heroic agility of Harry and Draco. The film amplifies this humiliation. The shot lingers on his crash, the broken wrist, Madame Hooch's scolding. Neville's pain isn't treated seriously. It's treated as a joke, reinforcing the trope of the accident-prone weakling. And as someone who spent her childhood also being the accident-prone weakling, I take offence. Oh, and let's not forget to mention the forgetfulness trope. Gran sent me a remember-all, but I can't remember what I've forgotten. Neville's remember-all becomes a symbol of his supposed incompetence. He can't even remember what he's forgotten. While it's played for laughs, it echoes real-world stereotypes about learning differences or memory impairments, reducing them to quirks or failures rather than traits of a fully realised character. But family pressure and trauma may be at least part of the reason why Neville is the way he is. He did not want to look at Harry, and Harry understood why. He too had just seen the tragic figures of Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom. Neville's backstory adds a deeper layer. His parents, tortured into insanity by Death Eaters, are permanent residents of St. Mungo's. This is a devastating depiction of disability, framed not through their agency, but through Neville's shame. The narrative uses their condition to highlight Neville's inadequacy, as if his struggles are genetic, inevitable. The film version softens this scene, making it tender, but it still centres Neville's pain, not his parents' humanity. The disabled body is once again a backdrop for someone else's growth. But then, by the end of the series, Neville transforms into a hero. In Deathly Hallows Part 2, he gives a rousing speech, pulls the sword of Gryffindor and kills Nagini, a moment of triumph that fans often celebrate, but it comes at a cost. The story only grants Neville dignity when he grows into physical competence, bravery, and conventionally masculine strength. It was Neville, still battered and bloody, but with a great deal of determination in his face, who had pulled the sword from the Sorting Hat. Notice the language. Battered, bloody, but also determined, victorious. His earlier clumsiness is erased, replaced by a narrative of redemption. The message is clear. Value is earned not by existing as you are, but by transforming into someone stronger, more heroic, more neurotypical. As a dyspraxic with ADHD, I do not care for this picture. Neville's arc mirrors a common ableist trope. The disabled or impaired character must overcome their deficits to achieve worth. His story tells us that weakness, clumsiness, or difference are temporary problems to be fixed, not valid identities in their own right. The glow-up is inspiring to many, yes, although, how puberty just happening is inspiring is beyond me. But it also quietly reinforces the idea that only the able-bodied, confident, heroic self is truly valuable. I don't love that the glow-up erases his early struggles and how hard he tries, and thus implies that transformation equals worth. Let's honour younger Neville rather than just erasing him. What if he had been respected all along? He's so brave. He knows he's rubbish at many things, but he just keeps going. That is inspiring. Like, what's the saying? Bravery is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. That is Neville. He should have that on a little cushion in his room. You can probably get it from TK Maxx. Dumbledore gave him house points for bravery in Philosopher's Stone because he stood up to his friends to stop them from breaking the rules. It's a really big deal for a first year at secondary school. If Mad-Eye Moody and Remus Lupin represent individual experiences of disabilities, St. Mungo's Hospital reveals how the wizarding world as a whole treats disabled and chronically ill people. It's the only medical institution we ever see in the series, other than the school sick room, and it's built on the assumption that disability is a tragedy to be cured or a failure to be managed. Welcome to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Melodies and Injuries, founded by famous healer Longbottom for the treatment of magical injuries and diseases. The hospital's name itself, for maladies and injuries, positions disability indifference as a deviation from health that must be treated or fixed. And no, I know, don't come at me with, well, are you saying that chronic illness shouldn't be treated, Janice? Like, arthritis and autism are not the same thing, and neither of them are caused by Tylenol. In a world where magic can instantly mend bones or regrow tissue, permanent acquired physical disability shouldn't exist, right? And yet, those with lasting conditions are isolated here, hidden away from the rest of wizarding society. A very old witch in a long dressing gown was wheeling a cart of potions along the corridor. The imagery mirrors a real-world hospital. Corridors, patients, potions, healers in uniforms. It's bureaucratic, not magical. An institution that contains the unfixable, rather than celebrating or integrating them. It's clear that permanent damage means permanent exile. They found Gilderoy Lockhart sitting up in bed, writing in the air with an invisible quill. He had no idea who they were. The characters we meet at St. Mungo's, like Gilderoy Lockhart after his memory charm backfires, or Neville's parents after their torture, never recover. They're not allowed back into community life. Instead, they're just frozen in a kind of narrative exile, existing only to evoke pity or tragedy. Lockhart's memory loss is treated as comic relief. The once vain celebrity becomes a childlike amnesiac, amusing but pathetic. The narrative never explores his lived experience, only how far he's fallen from pride to pitiful. This echoes an ableist pattern, disability as punishment for arrogance or moral failure. Neville's parents' mental illness is treated more somberly, but still as an object of silence and shame. And yes, Neville may feel that as a child in the real world would, but the series doesn't examine it. The Longbottoms exist only to explain Neville's pain. They have no dialogue, no agency, no interiority. Their disability serves the able-bodied character's development. This is textbook inspiration porn. In the wizarding world, there is only cure or containment. No space exists for living with disability. In the wizarding world, there is no visible example of a disabled witch or wizard living fully outside of St. Mungo's other than Mad-Eye Moody. You're either cured or you disappear into the hospital. There's no notion of accommodation, accessibility or social inclusion. Hogwarts, for example, remains physically inaccessible, filled with stairs and shifting architecture. The hospital is the only solution society offers. Cure if possible, confinement if not. This binary, cure or exile, reflects what disability scholars call the medical model of disability, the idea that the problem lies in the individual's body, not in the environment that excludes them. St. Mungo's institutionalizes that worldview, literally. What's striking is what's missing. The series never imagines magical wheelchairs, enchanted canes, or spells that create accessibility rather than cure. There's no community of disabled witches and wizards advocating for rights, no discourse of care or inclusion. Instead, the hospital just kind of becomes the magical oubliette, the place where disabled people go to vanish from the story. St. Mungo's isn't just a hospital though, it's a mirror of our own world's ableism, wrapped up in fantasy. A world that J.K. Rowling could have used to reimagine disability through magic, to create worlds where access is effortless and inclusion is inherent, but it instead replicates the same structures of exclusion and pity. In that sense, it's one of the most revealing spaces in the entire series, a reminder that imagination alone doesn't guarantee justice. So whilst Hogwarts teaches bravery, loyalty and love, it also teaches something else, that broken bodies belong behind closed doors, and that's not magic, that's ableism, dressed in robes. Hello friends, if I look different, it's because I just had a driving lesson, picked my 4-year-old up from school, walked back home with him because we missed the bus, don't recommend, had a rather rushed dinner, then took part in an online panel, then put my 3 children to bed, and now here we are. Anyway, moving on with the cure narrative. So, I mentioned earlier that within a world where magic can instantly mend bones or regrow tissue, permanent acquired physical disability shouldn't exist. Firstly, I do feel really weird about the ethical implications of saying that. Don't worry. Secondly, I said acquired because to think about the logical conclusions of a world where being born with a disability doesn't exist kind of freaks me out. In the wizarding world, injury and illness are never permanent, at least not for the people who matter. Broken bones regrow overnight. Cuts, bruises, and even paralysis can be healed in seconds. But behind the whimsy of magical medicine lies something more troubling. A deep discomfort with disability itself. Where do we draw the line? Why use magic for some things and not others? Why does anyone even need to wear glasses in this world? Are the limitations of magical cures ethical or logical? How is anything logical in a fictional world written by one woman who isn't very logical? Healing magic is framed as quick, effortless, and absolute. In Goblet of Fire, a broken nose is mended with a flick of a wand. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry's shattered arm bones are just, regrown overnight after Lockhart's spell misfires. The process is excruciating, but crucially temporary. The humour of this scene, Harry's floppy arm played for laughs, underscores how pain and healing are spectacle, not consequence. Bodies break and heal without lasting change. The message is simple. Damage is temporary, and the ideal body can always be restored, as long as you're an important character, obviously. And your pain isn't there, just, be a plot device. Our protagonist gets Skelly Grow, and his arm is just back to being exactly the way it was. Mad-Eye Moody gets permanent pain. It's the horror of the unfixable, forever treated with an air of revulsion. When someone can't be cured, the tone shifts sharply from comedy to tragedy. Neville's parents, permanently damaged, are mourned as lost causes. Lupin's condition can only be suppressed, never healed, framing his life as a perpetual struggle. And Mad-Eye Moody's prosthetics mark him as a relic of trauma, half human, half machine. In these moments, Rowling's world reveals its hierarchy of bodies. The cured body is celebrated. The incurable one is erased. Magic doesn't fail, people do. Disability becomes synonymous with brokenness, the ultimate narrative failure. And thus the cure isn't just medical, it's moral. Good characters use magic to restore normality, whilst those who resist transformation are portrayed as monstrous. Think of Lupin's reliance on Wolfsbane potion to keep himself safe. The potion doesn't heal him, it just makes him acceptable to others. His goodness depends on self-suppression. The potion that Professor Snape has been making for me, it's a very difficult potion to brew. It keeps me sane. The language of keeps me sane is telling, as if his true self, his disabled or infected self, is inherently dangerous, uncontainable, less human. This mirrors real-world narratives about medication, control, and conformity, where the goal isn't acceptance, but normalization. And for those who can't be cured, the narrative often frames their disability as punishment. Lockhart's amnesia isn't tragic, it's karmic. He loses his memory for his vanity and fraudulence, a moral lesson disguised as a medical mishap. He gave them a glad cry of recognition and held up his quill, but then looked puzzled and said, "Have we met?" As someone who has memory problems, I would not wish it upon someone merely for being vain, nor even for being a conman. Disability here becomes poetic justice, the body enacting punishment for moral flaws. It's the same logic that once justified real-world discrimination, that illness, injury, or difference reflect inner corruption or failure. But what is the social cost of a perfect world? The Wizarding World's obsession with repair and perfection extends beyond medicine. Hogwarts itself is designed for the able-bodied. Towering stairs, narrow corridors, flying sports. In a world that could make anything possible, accessibility doesn't even exist as a concept. The entire society is built on the assumption that everyone can be fixed. Even Dumbledore's wisdom upholds this idea. He comforts, he heals, but he never questions the system that erases difference. The narrative never imagines what a truly inclusive magical world might look like, because it assumes that everyone can and should be cured. Disability scholars call this the cure narrative, the belief that the only acceptable resolution to illness or difference is its eradication. In fantasy, it's often disguised as empowerment, magic as healing, but the underlying message is the same. The disabled body is a problem to be solved, not a reality to be embraced. Healers are trained to return the body to its proper state. Even the language on the page, proper state, implies that disabled bodies are improper, deviant, unnatural. The cure narrative doesn't just erase disability from the wizarding world, it justifies why that erasure feels right. In a world where magic can do anything, the limits we see aren't magical, they're cultural. The cure narrative in Harry Potter isn't just about healing spells, it's about who gets to be whole, who's allowed to belong, and who disappears when perfection becomes the only form of survival. If the cure is the only acceptable outcome, what happens to those who can't or won't be cured? Well, to answer that, we have to look beyond the page, at how the Harry Potter franchise itself treats disability in its real-world legacy. Ableism in the Harry Potter universe doesn't end with the books. It extends into how the franchise represents bodies, builds spaces, and markets magic. The fantasy of perfection that defines Rowling's world has become part of the brand, and it shapes how millions of fans experience the wizarding world in real life. In the film adaptations, disability is almost entirely erased. Mad-Eye Moody's magical prosthetics become cool gadgets. Lupin's illness is metaphorical, stylized, and invisible. The camera's gaze polishes away pain, turning difference into aesthetic. The films aestheticize disability when it's useful and delete it when it's not. Lupin's scars vanish between scenes. Moody's limp becomes a swagger. Even the hospital wing, once a place of consequence, becomes a visual afterthought. The result is a world where disability is either stylized, sanitized, or simply unseen. Mad-Eye Moody stumped around on his wooden leg, his magical eye whizzing in all directions. In the book, Moody's gait and eye are grotesque. In the film, they're almost steampunk chic, a visual metaphor for toughness and the wars he's been through. The adaptation turns bodily trauma into branding. In 2010, when the first Wizarding World theme park opened, fans with disabilities noticed something familiar and disappointing. Steep ramps, narrow walkways, and ride restrictions mirrored the same inaccessibility built into the fictional Hogwarts. The world that promised magic for everyone wasn't built for everybody. The broomstick ride, the Hogwarts castle walkthrough, even Ollivander's wand shop all require able-bodied movement. Accessibility, when offered, is separate, not equal. Like St. Mungo's in the books, the solution is containment, not redesign. These aren't oversights. They're physical manifestations of a worldview, one that assumes normal means mobile, sighted, hearing, neurotypical, a world built on fantasy but designed without imagination for disabled visitors. Which isn't surprising when we consider that, according to the marketing of the main trio, perfect wizard is one who is young, able-bodied, conventionally attractive, and white. Although, boy, is that a critique that needs its own video. The franchise's marketing reinforces the same idealized bodies we see on screen. Every wand ad, every promotional poster, every Halloween costume campaign centers able-bodied perfection. Disability isn't part of the fantasy being sold, it's outside of the frame. Even Harry's own technically visible disabling moments, his broken bones, his mental trauma, his cursed scar, are aestheticized into a hero mark. His pain looks good on a poster, but permanent disability? There's no space for that in the magic economy. The lack of official positive disability representation within the Harry Potter series does not, of course, mean that fans haven't found their own way to inject it. Online, fan creators imagine wheelchairs that levitate, hearing aids enchanted to translate Parseltongue, wands that respond to movement, not grip. These reimaginings fill the gaps the canon refuses to see. These communities show what inclusive magic could look like, not a cure for difference, but a celebration of it. In that way, the fandom does what the books couldn't. They make magic accessible. It's impossible to separate these patterns from their author. Rowling's public statements about trans rights and body autonomy have shown a consistent discomfort with physical and social variance. The same worldview that erases disabled people in her books also underpins her real-world politics, where difference is something to be managed, not embraced. When fans say the magic feels smaller now, this is why. The fantasy of belonging was always actually conditional on fitting a narrow image. And once you see that, it's hard to unsee. The Harry Potter series gave many of us our first taste of wonder, belonging, and chosen family, but it also carried with it the same exclusions and biases of the world that we live in. In a universe where magic could do anything, disability was too often erased, stigmatized, or turned into a symbol of tragedy or monstrosity. From St. Mungo's to the Quidditch pitch, the series shows us a world where broken things must be fixed and difference must be hidden. Disability, in Rowling's universe, isn't a reality, it's a flaw to be cured, a punishment to be endured, or a tragedy to be pitied. And that's not fantasy, that's ideology. If you can fix difference, should you? The Harry Potter franchise didn't invent ableism, but it reflects it perfectly. From the architecture of Hogwarts to the architecture of a theme park, from the cured hero to the forgotten patient, the Wizarding World teaches us who counts as magical and who doesn't. It's a world of infinite magical solutions, but still not built for everyone. Yet the real magic was never the ability to fix what's broken, but to live fully with what makes us different. Fandom has always been a place of resistance. Disabled fans continue to write themselves into this world, not by asking for a cure, but by demanding visibility. They're the true inheritors of the magic, rewriting it into something that finally feels inclusive, alive and real. If we stop asking how magic can cure us and start asking instead how it can include us, everything changes. Due to J.K. Rowling's personal politics and contemporary readings of her work, I'm sorry, Joanne, did you have a quota on anti-Semitic tropes with these freaking goblins? Who okayed this? Interacting with the Harry Potter universe is always going to be a sticky topic, especially for those of us who fall into marginalised groups in society, which is ironic, given that the chosen one outsider narrative speaks to us so well in particular. It's a great mix of history, culture, fantasy, and imagination, all wrapped up in a British boarding school. As a series, it has meant a lot to a lot of people. There are undoubtedly a lot of issues with the series, even as standalone books. Are we meant to want to live in a world where the concept of mudbloods is openly talked about? But it did encourage many slow readers to pick up a book and then ignited a love of reading. A lot of classic literature has parts that I skip over when I'm reading to my son at night, and he would undoubtedly love the series, but I don't want to give my money to J.K. Rowling. As corny as it might sound, magic isn't in wands or spells. It's in building worlds, real or fictional, where everyone belongs. Worlds where disability isn't something to be hidden or cured, but something that shapes identity, creativity, and resilience. If we can see the ableism in the stories we loved, then we can also imagine better stories. Stories that honour everybody, every mind, every kind of magic. And maybe that's the most radical spell in the end. Disability justice for all. Before we wrap up though, I want to be clear about the scope of this video. I focused on disability and how the wizarding world treats bodies that fall outside of its norms, because that's the lens I live with and understand most intimately, because I am disabled. I'm not non-white, Jewish, or trans, but there are so many brilliant creators out there speaking from those perspectives, exploring how Harry Potter handles race, gender, and religion with the nuance and care they deserve. So I shall link some of their work below. Think of this video as one part of a much bigger conversation about who gets to belong in magical worlds. And in ours. The list is so far from exhaustive, so please let me know in the comments which other creators you love who've been having these discussions too. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've really enjoyed it. It has been quite a lot of fun to put together. So if there are any other film series, books, or television shows you would like to see me analyze through this lens, then let me know. She does love a film trope. In the meantime, thank you as ever to my wonderful clubbies for wholeheartedly supporting this channel. I probably could not make videos without the Kellgren-Fozard Club, and so I deeply appreciate the support of everyone who signs up to become a member. You can also do so by clicking the join button down below next to the subscribe button and get access to a monthly behind the scenes video with a library of over 85, I think now, videos. I've been doing this a long time. We should probably do something special for like the 90th one. Oh, and then 100. Thank you again as well to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. I mean guys, if you haven't signed up to Surfshark by now, what are you doing? What are you doing with your lives? How are you watching this right now? Are you watching this on a secure connection, or are you not? 4 months for free. 4 months. What, are you gonna pass that by? Don't pass that by. Click the link. Don't be silly. Everyone else who already has Surfshark, well done. I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.